Hey everyone, Crow back again, and I've recently played all the games in this Evercade cart, the C64 Collection 1. The first cartridge in the computer line, hence the new blue box. For those not in the loop, the C64 is referencing the Commodore 64 computer, originally introduced in 1982, but the Commodore name is not licensed, so it's just referred here as the C64. This collection was one I was looking forward to because the Commodore 64 was one of the computers I had as a kid, and it was used regularly all the way up until it was replaced with a PC with a 286 processor. The Commodore 64 is still one of the older platforms I'll collect games for, alongside the Atari 2600 and the Atari 8-bit computer line. Now, the one thing I realized during the time I've been on YouTube is that the Commodore 64 experience was completely different in the UK than it was here in the US. The games that were popular seem to be completely different between the two regions, and it may have something to do with the fact that in the US, it wasn't uncommon for a Commodore 64 user to have a disk drive, so most of the games here were released on 5 1/4 floppy disks, while the disk drive seemed to be a rarity in the UK from what I can gather. So many of the games in the UK were released on cassette tape. Now, in this collection, there are 14 games included, originally released from 1983 through 1989. Most of these games were originally published by Epyx or Usen. The Epyx games that are in this collection are the ones that I'm at least familiar with. I mean, hell, I still have some Commodore 64 Epyx games in my collection, but pretty much all of the Usen ones are completely new to me. Now, seeing as how these games were originally on a computer and the Evercade lacks a keyboard, in the instances where a key needs to be pressed, pressing select on the controller will bring up an on-screen virtual keyboard, which does obstruct the screen when activated, but doesn't really detract from the game since it's not needed very often, and it's never really needed during actual gameplay. The Commodore 64 joystick only had one button, so the games where 2 or more buttons were necessary, the keyboard was often used. But fortunately, in most cases, those keys were mapped to buttons on the Evercade, making things a little bit easier than they were on the actual hardware. As with every Evercade release, the cartridge comes in a clamshell case, along with a full-color manual, and as a bonus, there's what I am interpreting as a faux copy protection key that was included. And although it's not necessary for any of the 14 games included, there is a secret hidden in here that I'll talk about in a future video. But for now, I'm going to focus on the 14 games. I'm going to talk about each one individually, and then I'm going to rank the games along with the cartridge itself. But before I get started, I just want to mention a couple things. Firstly, I played all of these games on the Evercade VS using an arcade stick. That's how I've usually been playing these games, and I just never mentioned it before. Secondly, for whatever reason, some of these games are missing their title screens. I'm only guessing that these may have been removed to get to the actual game quicker, since the title screens on the Commodore 64 often had to take time to load, and I guess it's just kind of unnecessary, but that's just my guess. So, let's get started with the earliest game and proceed in the order of release. Well, getting the exact release dates is nigh impossible for these kind of games, so this will be roughly the order of release. One of our earliest releases is Gateway to Apshai, released by Epyx in 1983, and it was originally released in a cartridge format, though it was later re-released on a diskette as a budget title. This game saw a release on several platforms, but the Commodore 64 was the original platform the game was developed for. At least I think it was. Gateway to Apshai is part of an RPG game series which started with Temple of Apshai in 1979 for the TRS-80 and the Commodore PET computers. Now, I don't know about the game series as a whole, but it's my understanding that Gateway to Apshai is more of an action-oriented entry in the series. The game's original manual spends 2 pages explaining the story, but basically it's your destiny to find a safe passage through 8 levels of dungeons in order to open the gates of Apshai, which will lead to the Temple of Apshai, which once reclaimed will lift the curse from the land. So I guess this can be considered a prequel to Temple of Apshai. I was looking forward to playing this one because it seems similar to Tower of Doom, which was included in the Intellivision Collection too, and it is indeed pretty similar, although this one came out several years before Tower of Doom. This is one of those games that may seem confusing before you work out the controls. On the original Commodore 64, you would use the joystick to move your character around the dungeon and use the single button to perform whatever action was selected, whether it be using a weapon, healing yourself, equipping items, or using spells. Now, selecting actions was done with cycling through the options using one of 3 function keys. Pressing F3 was used for cycling through items in your inventory, and selecting a piece of equipment will equip it, selecting a spell will activate it, and selecting a healing item will restore your hit points. Pressing F5 would cycle through a variety of actions like using keys, identifying traps in the room, searching for hidden doors, dropping items, and checking your inventory status or equipped weapons. F7 will put you in attack mode where you can cycle through options that will use your sword or arrows if you have any available. The nice thing about this Evercade version is that the F3, F5, and F7 keys are mapped to buttons on the controller, so you don't need to constantly be bringing up the virtual keyboard. It took me about 20 or 30 minutes to understand the controls, and it was smooth sailing from there. When you start the game on level 1, you'll have a choice between 16 dungeons. Then you'll explore the dungeon, picking up any loot and items along the way, as well as fighting any creatures in your way. The thing that's odd about the game is that there are no exits to each dungeon. You have a set amount of time to explore, and when that time is up, you'll automatically go to the next level. What's extra odd is if you feel you're done exploring, exiting to the next level is actually an option you can select whenever you want. But you'll want to explore and collect as much treasure as you can because your stats will upgrade between each level based on what you've collected. But make sure to check for traps because you may want to avoid some treasures that will activate traps. Before you start the next level, you'll select from another 16 dungeons, and the game continues like that with each level containing progressively more difficult creature encounters. So, according to the story given, you'll beat the game once you clear level 8, right? Well, no. I was kind of disappointed to discover that level 8 just repeats until you eventually lose all your lives. Meaning you'll never actually reach the Gateway of Apshai. It's just a game played for score. It's certainly not a bad game, but why a 2-page story about your goal when it can never be reached? The other downside is that the game isn't randomized. Every dungeon and every level is exactly the same. But on the other hand, it gives you the opportunity to replay the game selecting different paths, trying to figure out which one will potentially get you a high score. I did end up liking this one in the end though. Very similar to Tower of Doom, but the approach to gameplay is very different. Next up, also from Epyx in 1983, is Jumpman, a game that was originally developed with the intention of becoming a Donkey Kong clone, but wound up being something entirely different. It was originally developed for the Atari line of 8-bit computers, but received ports on several other platforms, including the Commodore 64. The game is for 1 to 4 players, but everyone takes turn and uses the same controller. Terrorists have planted bombs in a base on Jupiter, and it's up to Jumpman to defuse all the bombs. Basically, this translates to collecting all the rings on each level to proceed to the next. There are 30 levels in total, and every level has some sort of gimmick alluded to by the name of each, which is identified while the level is loading. There are a variety of hazards Jumpman will encounter, but the most common are these bullets that will slowly travel across the screen and then change directions and accelerate at high speed towards Jumpman when he lines up with them on the screen either horizontally or vertically. Other hazards are encountered sparsely and in some cases are regulated only to one level. Sometimes the gimmick of the level is the hazard itself, such as the room that is completely invisible, only showing the level elements as you pass by them, or the level where the bombs and platforms alternately disappear and reappear with every bomb collected. Sometimes there are moving platforms and even a magical floating ladder in one level. One thing that will commonly occur are holes appearing after a bomb is collected, making you think about the order in which you want to collect the bombs. The game doesn't appear to leave you in an unwinnable state though. If there are bombs remaining on the screen that are impossible to reach, the game will just let you proceed to the next level anyway. Now I should really talk about how the game controls, and I'll say that I found Jumpman very enjoyable to control, though there are a few quirks. Before each level starts, you can press any number between 1 and 8 to control the game's speed. The game says run speed, but other game elements change in speed as well. Well, some of them do, some of them don't. The thing is that I found the game's default speed of 4 to be incredibly slow. In most of the footage you're seeing here, I have the speed set to 2, which I found to be the sweet spot for me. I just think it's kind of weird you have to bring up the virtual keyboard to press a number before the level starts to change the run speed. I don't know why it couldn't have been an option to choose before the game starts like it does in Jumpman Jr., but fortunately the game speed remains the same until you decide to change it again, or until you start a new game. While navigating the levels, you'll utilize ladders that you can move up and down on, vines you'll automatically climb up, and ropes you'll automatically slide down. Now for those quirks I mentioned. Jumpman will die if he steps off of any ledge at any height, but will be fine if he jumps, which is something to keep in mind. I found he'll also get stuck on ladders from time to time, requiring you to jump to get free of them. However, to counterbalance this, if any part of Jumpman comes into contact with a platform, he'll just automatically levitate till he's on that platform. And that oddity has actually saved me from falling to my death on several occasions. The game can be very difficult, and some of the levels will require much trial and error, but I'll be damned if I didn't get hooked on this game and played it for several hours.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
That's the first thing you'll hear when you start a game of Impossible Mission. This game was originally released in 1984 by Epix for the Commodore 64 and was ported to several other platforms, and for any type of game to have speech like that was mind-blowing for the time. Speech in video games didn't really become commonplace until about the mid-1990s, so sometimes an older game becomes instantly memorable if it had speech. Even more memorable if the game is good. And Impossible Mission is definitely a good game. It's a platforming puzzle game where you infiltrate the stronghold of the evil Professor Adam Bender and must reach the main control room within 6 hours in order to prevent the professor from triggering a missile attack that will destroy the world. However, accessing the main control room isn't as simple as finding it, as there is a password that must be discovered to gain entry. This will require you to investigate items in every room for puzzle pieces, which then must be assembled properly for parts of the password. This is made even more difficult by the deadly robots patrolling each room that must be avoided. However, every robot has a set pattern they follow, so you'll have to figure each one out to determine if moving to certain areas is safe or not. This wasn't a game I was very familiar with. About 10 years ago, I posted a video where I attempted to play the Atari 7800 version of the game, and I vaguely had an idea of what I was supposed to do, but there was no way I was going to make any progress beyond searching every object for items. I completely understand it now, but I feel the way the game words stuff is a bit misleading. As an example of this, there are computer terminals that can be accessed in just about every room that will give you the option to reset the platforms or to temporarily disable the robots in the room. Selecting one of these options will either tell you that the password was accepted or that a password is required. The thing is, though, is that you're not actually looking for a password. You see, when you search an object in the room, which is done by holding up until the search bar disappears, by the way, you'll find one of 4 things. Most commonly, you'll find nothing. Or maybe you'll find one of the 36 puzzle pieces you'll need to complete the game. Or maybe you'll find an image of an arrow pointing a lift downward or an image of a robot sleeping. These are the so-called passwords the game is referring to. It's not like a password where once you know it, you can use it repeatedly. These work like access cards where if you use one, then it's gone from your inventory. For a while, I was confused as to how many I even had, but if you're in one of the elevator corridors, you can activate your computer and it will show you referring to them as snoozes and lift-in-its. As far as I could tell, this is the only place you can find out how many you have. I mean, it would have been nice to see that information if you're at the terminal trying to figure out if you want to use one. Now, I'll get back to the computer in a second, but first I want to mention the rooms with the giant checkerboard pattern on the wall, because accessing the computer in this room will activate a puzzle where it will activate several squares accompanied with a sound, and if you select them in the order from the lowest pitch tone to the highest pitch tone, you will gain either a snooze or a lift-in-it to your inventory. You can access this puzzle repeatedly to gain even more, but each time you do it, the sequence will get longer and longer. Back to your own computer though, this is where you can also see what time it is and all the puzzle pieces you've collected. And I've got to talk about these puzzle pieces because I was clueless on how these things worked for the longest time, and no matter what reference I looked at, I just wasn't getting it. It wasn't until I watched a video showing how the pieces went together that I finally understood it. You see, every reference I saw simply said that the 4 pieces go together and you may have to change the color and orientation of each piece. The area you have to work in is 2 by 2, so I thought that 1 piece goes in each square, but that's not right at all. The 4 pieces have to physically go on top of one another in a way where all the gaps are filled in with nothing overlapping. And once I knew that, I was still having a hard time since it's difficult to know which way each piece is supposed to be flipped, and the game will let you put mismatched pieces together if they are the same color and nothing overlaps. Fortunately, you can use your computer for help to let you know if you have the remaining 3 pieces that go with the selected piece, or you can simply have the computer automatically put 2 of the pieces in the correct orientation. The downside is, every time you use the computer for help, you'll lose 2 minutes of time. But you know what? To make life easier on myself, I didn't mind spending 36 minutes of time to have the computer correct the orientations of every piece in the game. It's far easier to put them together when you know you don't have to rotate them. You'll just have to have the time to spare, and you should have the time as long as you don't die a lot. Oh yeah, I never mentioned that you do have infinite lives in this game, but if you die, you lose 10 minutes of time. So you can die from time to time and still have plenty of time left over to complete the game, but dying excessively will lead to a game over pretty quickly. I mean, just don't fall into the holes or touch robots and you'll be fine. Now I've gone on about this one far longer than I intended to, but I've got to mention one final thing. Every time you play this game, the rooms, objects, puzzle pieces, and robot behaviors are all randomized. That's one of the reasons why finding the solutions to the puzzles online is so difficult, because the puzzle pieces themselves are randomized as well. This is great because it leads to a great deal of replayability. However, for some odd reason, this version on the Evercade doesn't include the game's title screen. The game just immediately starts as soon as you load it. So every time you select to play it from the Evercade menu, everything is going to be the same as the last time you booted it up. However, if you bring up the Evercade menu and select Reset, or bring up the virtual keypad and press Restore, the game will restart with everything now randomized, so that may be something to keep in mind when loading the game up. Another game from 1984 is Lee from Datasoft. The game was originally created for the Atari 8-bit line of computers and received many ports to other platforms, including this Commodore 64 version. The game was originally titled Bruce Lee, but the name was changed to just Lee to avoid the trademark for this version on the Evercade. And it really doesn't matter, nothing in the game had to change other than a modification to the title screen. The characters you see on screen have so little detail, they could be just about anyone you can imagine. So in this game, you control Lee as he works his way through 20 screens of platforming as he avoids deadly traps while collecting magic lanterns to unlock the way to defeating the evil wizard in order to receive unlimited wealth and immortality. On just about all of these screens, a black ninja and the green Yamo will appear to stop Lee, so he must either avoid them or confront them with an array of jump kicks and punches. It's probably best to avoid them if possible though, since another one will appear on screen when one is defeated. Lee has a limited amount of lives, and while he can take a few hits from the ninja or Yamo before losing a life, coming into contact with a trap will instantly claim one of his lives. The nice thing is that your enemies will also be eliminated if they get caught in a trap as well, though, as I mentioned, another one will always appear anyway. Once the evil wizard is defeated, the game simply loops from the beginning again, although the black ninja and green Yamo will appear on the screen faster than they did before. I guess this means that Lee never actually does attain unlimited wealth and immortality, because the game would just go on forever after that point if he did. This was a game I hadn't played before, but I knew it had its fans. I think the game's alright. Maybe I would have liked it more if I'd played the game back in the day, but I definitely did enjoy playing it here. The controls felt a little wonky at times, but not frequent enough to get frustrated by them. It is a little disappointing that there are only 2 types of enemy in the game, and the final boss doesn't even count as one since you could defeat him very easily without even touching him. And while Lee can jump, climb, run, and duck, he's only got 2 attacks, a jump kick and a punch. But I suppose there's not really much more you could do when the original platform this game was on had a joystick with only 1 button. It makes all the fighting in the game pretty repetitive though, Since I always just went for the jump kick, since it'll push the enemy back further and knock them to the ground, which is usually enough to get past them. Hitting them 2 or 3 times will eliminate them, but they'll just reappear again anyway, and you don't really know where that'll be. These guys aren't the greatest at tracking you down either. If they're on the same level or above you, they'll attempt to intercept you. But if you're above them, they really have no idea what to do, and they'll just stand there since ladders are apparently a foreign concept to them. Once in a while, they will climb up after you, but most of the time they think about it for quite a while before they do. The game does allow for 2 players simultaneously, but I only played this one myself. Again, I found the game was fun, but I really think it could have been improved to be more engaging. Also, from 1984 is Summer Games from Epix, the first entry in the popular Games series. This game received ports for multiple consoles and computers, however the Commodore 64 version here is the original. Up to 8 players can compete in 8 events, and although the game can be played taking turns using one controller, some events will let 2 players compete head-to-head if you've got 2 controllers. Like most games of this nature, each event has its own set of controls to learn. However, none of them are really that complicated and can easily be explained. One thing I always liked about this game is that most of the events don't require you to hammer away at the button or waggle the joystick like crazy. I say most because there is one event in particular where you do have to waggle the joystick, but at least it's not every event where you have to run. If you choose to play all the events, you'll play them in the following order. First is the pole vault, and I don't think this is the best event they could have started with because it's relatively easy to fail if you don't understand the timing of your inputs. You've got to push down at just the right time to plant the pole in the correct location, then push up at just the right time to put your guy in the correct position to be able to release and clear the bar. It took me a while to get back in the rhythm of it, but once I did, I would probably say this is one of my favorite events of the game. Which is why it was kind of frustrating when the game kept crashing to Commodore BASIC while I was playing with multiple players. I don't know what was causing it, but it just kept happening. When I was playing as a single player, I didn't have this issue though. The next event is diving, and you'll have to perform 4 different dives, each scored by a panel of judges. The controls are super simple here. Press the button to jump off the platform, and pushing the joystick in different directions will cause different poses with different rotation rates. The goal is to straighten out right before entering the water and create as little splash for the best score. I think this is a real fun event, although it is pretty easy to get carried away and completely fail the water entry. Third is the 4x400 meter relay, and this is a running event where you don't need to waggle the controller or mash the buttons. Instead, your runner will run at a regular pace, but if you push right, he'll run faster, but will spend more energy doing so. However, pushing to the left will slow the runner's pace considerably, but he'll gain energy back. You'll eventually approach the next runner, and when you're close enough, you'll press the button to hand the baton off. It'll continue like that until the 4th runner finishes the race. The event is alright, I suppose, but it's certainly not the most exciting. At least I don't have to waggle the controller like crazy. But up next is the 100 meter dash, and this is like a carbon copy of the last event, except it's shorter and has completely different controls. This is the one event where you have to waggle the joystick like crazy. The manual says up and down or left and right, but I had the best luck rotating the joystick in circles. Still though, this has to be one of my least favorite events. Event 5 is gymnastics, but it's really just a simple vaulting horse event. The button presses and timing is pretty simple on this one, though it may take a few attempts to start landing without falling over. This is an alright event, but since you only get 2 attempts and they happen so quickly, it's all over before you know it. Weirdly, this is the other event that glitched out on me, although this time it was just a graphical glitch and not one that crashed the whole game. The 6th event is the freestyle relay, and it's probably my least favorite event. It takes up a lot of time too, but I suppose I'm not fond of it because I never really understood how this event is intended to be controlled. More specifically, how you actually swim faster. The instructions say to press the button when your swimmer's arm enters the water to gain speed, but I could never figure out what the timing is supposed to be because my swimmer always moved extremely slow when I tried it that way. You know what does work though? Mashing the button. Really easy to do that too if you use a controller with autofire. Hey, it may be cheating, but I've got 4 swimmers that need to swim the length of the pool and back, so I'm using it. I never really liked this event, even back when I was a kid. The next event is literally almost exactly the same thing. The 100-meter freestyle. Imagine the last event, but now it's just one swimmer swimming the length of the pool and back. I almost wouldn't even call this a different event, as it's just a shorter version of the last event. And the only reason I like this one more is because it's over quicker. The last event is one of my favorites though, and that's skeet shooting. Your target reticle will begin at the leftmost station, and pressing the button will cause a clay pigeon or two to be released into the air that you'll have to target and destroy before they fly out of range. Now I know that playing shooting games with a gamepad or joystick with a reticle like that isn't fun most of the time, but it actually works here. Probably because it was designed with the controller in mind to begin with, and there aren't any more than 2 targets with predictable trajectories to go after at any one time. So, before I started playing, I wondered if the game held up as it did in my memories, and I gotta say it certainly did for the most part. The only thing I didn't like were the glitches I was encountering in this Evercade version, but there's always the possibility that a firmware patch may address these issues in the future. It would have been nice if we also got Summer Games 2 in this collection, because if you originally owned Summer Games and Summer Games 2, you could have combined the games and played in a competition with events from both games. Summer Games was a massive success for Epyx, so in 1985 they released 2 follow-ups, Summer Games 2 and Winter Games, and they were both initially created for the Commodore 64 with many ports to other platforms. Now unfortunately we didn't get Summer Games 2 in this Evercade collection, but we did get Winter Games. And while I remember playing Summer Games as a kid, I think I remember playing Winter Games way more, so I was able to get back into this game far quicker than I did with Summer Games. The setup is almost identical to Summer Games, except there are 7 events instead of 8. But now there's an option to choose which events you want to compete in, instead of just one or all of them. If you choose to play all the events, the order in which they appear is as follows. First up are the hot dog aerials. Your skier will automatically jump into the air, and while airborne, you'll press the joystick in different directions to perform tricks and flips. You'll only realistically have enough time for 2 maneuvers at most, because you'll also need to make sure you leave the joystick neutral in time for a successful landing. It's a fun event, but there's only so much you can do. However, even with 3 attempts per player, this one is over relatively quickly. Second is the biathlon, and it's one of the longer events in the game. This event is a combination of cross-country skiing and rifle shooting. During the cross-country portions, you'll rhythmically push left and right in timing with the skier's motions to move at a quick, steady pace. When going downhill, simply push down for a little extra push, and when going uphill, moving left and right quickly will get you up faster. 4 times during the event, you'll come across a shooting range, and you'll have to push up and down to open the gun chamber and load a shell. When the moving reticle is over the target, fire, and repeat for the 5 targets each range has before it's back to more skiing. 5 seconds is added to your time for every target you miss. I don't know exactly what it is about this event, but it's always been one of my favorites, and I remember playing this one a lot when I was a kid. The third event is speed skating, and it's one of the easiest events. Like in biathlon, you'll rhythmically push left and right in order to move your skater, and the better you do it, the faster they go. That's all there is to this one. It's simple, fun, and over pretty quickly. Event 4 is figure skating, and this is the event that always trips people up, because it's literally impossible to succeed at this event without knowing how the controls work. Usually in most events, even if you don't have the instructions, you can eventually figure out the controls, but not figure skating. I won't go into too much detail, but your skater will automatically move forward, and depending on which direction you push the joystick and press the fire button, depends on the move she performs. If the move has her jumping in the air, you'll need to press the fire button again before landing, or she'll fall. That's something the Evercade manual forgets to tell you, by the way. There are 7 maneuvers you can perform, as well as choosing to skate backwards or forwards. It's important to note that 2 of the moves only work when skating forwards, and the rest only work if skating backwards. If you perform the wrong type of move, you'll fall. That's why nearly everyone who plays this without reading the instructions is constantly falling for the whole event. On top of all that, your timing in regards to your skater's leg position determines whether or not the maneuver is graceful or awkward. The event lasts for 1 minute, and as far as I know, in order to get a perfect score of 6, you have to perform all 7 maneuvers gracefully within that time. Well, I tried and tried, but the best I could do was about a 4.2 or a 4.6. I haven't really figured out what exactly I need to do to increase that score. What's funny though is that I know I played winter games a lot back in the day, but I don't have any memories of playing this figure skating game. And then it hit me. I never had the manual for this game, and since I probably never could figure out the controls, this was an event I never chose to play. And now that I do know the controls, I'll still probably skip the event. Next up is the ski jump, and this is another event where you kinda need to know the controls. But you can easily fumble through the event and still score points, so even failing isn't really that bad. After pushing the button to start your descent, you'll need to press the button again to begin your jump when near the edge of the ramp. Now the tricky part is that while you're in the air, you'll need to adjust your skier's position as it's visible in the zoom window by pushing up, down, left, or right in order to put the skier in the correct landing position. And if you don't know the correct landing position, well, it's just trial and error until you figure it out. The vast majority of your points come from the distance traveled, so even if you crash and get no points for style, you're not really losing out on that many points. I think it's a fun event in the end since you feel accomplished for getting a good landing, but I don't think you'll really feel frustrated if you crash because you only miss out on a handful of points if you do. The 6th event is free skating, and it's almost exactly like figure skating, unfortunately. This event is worse though, because it lasts twice as long, and you've got to attempt to do all 7 maneuvers 3 times each successfully within the time limit. I don't even know how this can be considered a separate event, as it's just a slight variation of figure skating. As you could probably guess, I also skipped this event when I was a kid. However, now as an adult, I can probably skip it faster. Fortunately, the last event isn't bad, and it's relatively simple. It's bobsledding, and you don't even need to worry about the part where you launch the bobsled. You'll just automatically start moving with everyone inside when the event starts. The screen is divided up into 3 sections: the overhead map that shows where you are, a behind the bobsled view, and your speed and time. You simply need to push left and right to lean into each turn. If you do it wrong, you'll crash, but it's fairly easy not to crash. If you're unfamiliar with the course, you can see the map to prepare for the next turn, but the course is easily memorized and you can simply just look at the bobsled view for the timing of each turn. I mean, it just goes right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, and that's all there is to it. I guess the real trick is figuring out when to lean for each turn for the fastest time in the end. And that covers it for winter games. I know that as a kid between summer and winter games, I played winter games more, and I think that'll still be the case here on the Evercade, though I will still skip those skating events. Alleykat is up next, and it was released by Usen in 1986, and I'm not sure how exactly I should describe this one since I read several different descriptions for this game before playing, and it still wasn't quite what I was expecting. Is it a racing game? Is it a shoot 'em up? Well, it's got elements of both, but not in any traditional sense. The game's story is quite simple. Alleykat is a series of races that takes place all around the galaxy, and you're trying to become the Alleykat champion. The racing season lasts 12 months, and there are 2 or more races that occur every month, but you can only choose to participate in one every month. You'll choose each race based on a variety of variables such as the location, the type of race, entrance fee, prize awarded, and a number of laps. Now it sounds like a racing game, but I hesitate to call it that because you're not really racing against anyone. Your only goal is to finish the required number of laps without your ship exploding. If you do, you get the prize money. If you don't, well, you don't get the prize money. But it's not necessarily game over if you still have money to participate in one of the next races. During each quote-unquote race, you'll just be dodging or destroying obstacles in the form of the computer-controlled gravelcraft vehicles or the landscape itself. This is where the shoot-'em-up element comes from, but oddly enough, you'll be destroying much more of the terrain than the so-called gravelcrafts, because by destroying the terrain, there'll be less stuff for you to crash into in subsequent laps. However, depending on the race, the terrain can be really brittle or so hard that you'll have to dodge elements on at least one pass-through. And dodging isn't just about left or right, as the landscape can be flown under, over, or through. Yeah, you'll have to pay more attention to the landscape than anything else, because while your ship can usually survive a few hits before going down, hitting a part of the landscape can potentially end your run. If you start flashing, that means you've taken a lot of damage, and you're usually one hit away from being destroyed at that point. But the landscape is littered with the letter E, so if you fly low over an E, your ship will be repaired to a certain extent. Sometimes the course will also have the letter G, and flying over those will award extra money. And as far as I know, it's the only way to get money other than finishing the races. But it's important to mention that your money is not your score. Destroying things will earn points, while finishing races will earn you money. Makes sense since the game is over when you don't have any money left to continue. Now, I did mention there were different race types, but it really doesn't affect how each race is played too much. It's really an indicator as the type of bonus you'll get when the race is over. For example, a time trial awards points based on how much time is spent at a high speed, and in a speed trial, the points are awarded based on the time spent at a low speed. Another example is that a demolition race awards points based on how much of the landscape you've destroyed, while a dodge'em race awards points based on how much you don't destroy. I think it's an interesting way to get you to change the way you play each race, but you totally have the option to ignore that completely as well. Now, I wound up liking this game, but it took me a bit of time to understand a lot of what was going on, especially when I was expecting either a traditional racing game or a traditional shoot 'em up. One of the confusing elements was the landscape, as it can be initially hard to determine what details can be flown under, over, through, or even not at all. And it's mostly due to the perspective. On top of that, add in that there are 8 different environments, and while one environment might be easier to decipher, another may not be. I can work my way through that issue, but the bigger issue is the controls in the game. You can fly up, down, left, right, speed up, slow down, perform a loop-de-loop, fire a gun, and transform into combat mode and back into speed mode, which is something I hadn't even alluded to up until this point. All this with an 8-way controller with one button. I think it's a little bit too much to control with the controller at hand, and as a result, I found myself meaning to do one thing, but accidentally doing another. For example, pushing up will lower your ship to the ground, but pushing up and holding the button will speed you up. But the button is also how you fire the gun. So sometimes I want to get close to the ground, but forget I'm tapping the button, and accidentally speed up, which often leads to crashing. Working your way around the controls is a major hurdle, and I don't even know if I could get totally used to the way the ship moves left and right. It's not like a regular shoot 'em up, and it feels like it's momentum based, and that's something that makes it incredibly difficult to dodge terrain at times. Hell yeah! The game sometimes does start you off with an obstacle you'll have to immediately dodge at the start of the race, and I swear I had crashed in some races less than a second after it started. And this would have been incredibly annoying if I didn't save state in between every race. Iridis Alpha is another game released by Usin, and it was created by Jeff Minter in 1986. And if you know the name Jeff Minter, you know there's a good chance you're in for one trippy game. However, I'm willing to bet that more than a few people booted up this game thinking it was a standard shoot 'em up, and then would get frustrated that they kept getting destroyed for apparently no reason, and then shutting it off thinking it was a terrible game. Hell, even the page for the game in the Evercade manual is pretty vague on what you need to do. This game is tough to approach for the first time. First, you've got to understand what you're meant to do, and even when you know, the game is still incredibly difficult. If I had to describe this game in one word, it would be balance. You see, the very first thing you have to understand when playing this game is that not only does your ship get destroyed when you run out of energy, but it also gets destroyed when you collect too much energy. There's a meter at the bottom of the screen that indicates your energy level, but it's easier just to pay attention to the color of your ship. The darker it is, the lower your energy level. The brighter it is, the higher your energy level. If the ship is black, it's very close to being destroyed when hit. If the ship is white, it's very close to being destroyed if you pick up more energy. So when your ship is a darker color, you'll want to gain energy, and when it's brighter, you'll want to offload your energy by either taking damage or releasing it into the core. Now, I'm not going to go into the game story because it's way too in-depth, and you don't really need to know it to play the game. But I'm going to tell you all you really need to know in order to play this game. Alright, the The screen is divided up into 3 sections. The top section is the gameplay area, the bottom section is the game information, and the middle section is pretty much nothing until you get past level 3. The game gives you 3 levels to play as sort of practice before it gets more complicated. So for the first 3 levels, you just shoot and destroy what you can until you get too bright, and then you can either get hit to lower your energy level, or better yet, transfer the energy into the core. The core is really just a long tract of land. When you lower yourself to the ground, you'll transform into this weird walking creature, and I think you have to be still in order to transfer your energy into the core. Whenever you transfer a certain amount of energy into the core, you'll get to play a bonus game. However, that's not something I've actually gotten to play yet, so I need to work on that. Also, if you're low on energy and you land on the core, you'll take back energy you've already deposited. Getting off the core requires you to walk to the edge and jump off to transform back into the ship. You'll get to the next level when you destroy the number of ships listed next to your energy meter, and just to make things a little bit harder to decipher, that number is in hexadecimal. Just a note on scoring though, when you destroy objects, the number of points you earn is multiplied by how fast you're moving. So if you're destroying stuff without moving, you won't score any points. Now, when you make it past the 3rd level, the middle portion of the screen opens up, and there are more things you need to worry about. It's basically starting the game again, but it's upside down. So now it's like you're playing 2 games at once. But you only need to worry about 1 ship at a time. You'll still be playing as the top ship, but when you destroy an enemy and it leaves a ring, should you fly into that ring without shooting it, you'll transfer into playing the game with the upside down ship. Now, if you get confused, you just need to keep in mind that you're playing the game with the colored ship and not the gray one. And you can't ignore the upside down area either. All the way to the left of the info screen, there are 2 symbols representing the right side up section and the upside down section. The longer you spend in one section, the darker that symbol becomes for the other one. If it turns completely black, you'll lose a life. You'll need to transfer over to the other side before that happens to reset it to white again. And that's the basic crash course on how to play this game. There's plenty of other stuff to learn, like I didn't even mention the warp gates or traveling to different worlds, but just getting past the 3rd level can be a total pain because of these weird gray creatures that show up that kind of look like cannonballs with their tongues sticking out. They will home right in on you and stick to you, causing you to lose energy constantly. They are a real pain to avoid and really tough to detach if one gets stuck to you. They seem like creatures that shouldn't be showing up until much later in the game, but they can easily cause you to lose all your lives before even making it past level 3. Regardless, I found that once I understood how to play it, it was easy to get into, but it was still hard to deal with those tongue guys. I also wanted to mention that there's a semi-hidden game called Made in France in this game, and it's accessible by bringing up the virtual keypad and pressing F1. However, the game is kind of unplayable on the Evercade because it requires you to press the M and N buttons on the keyboard, which aren't mapped to the controller, requiring the virtual keyboard to remain on screen, which obstructs your view of what's going on. While in this game, pressing the asterisk key will bring up a demo called DNA, which also requires the virtual keyboard, but since it's not really a game, it's still something that can be messed around with here. But you'll probably only mess with it once before returning to the main game, and then probably never feel the need to return to it again. Our 3rd game from 1986 is the Movie Monster game from Epix, a game where you control one of 6 monsters in one of 5 scenarios across 6 cities. This is somewhat of a follow-up to an earlier title Epix released called Crush, Crumble, and Chomp. However, the Movie Monster game is more of an action-oriented game because Crush, Crumble, and Chomp was more of a turn-based strategy game that required a lot of keyboard commands, so that wouldn't have really worked on the Evercade, even though I kind of wish it did since I'm sort of nostalgic for that game. And even though I've known about the Movie Monster game, playing it in this collection was the first time I ever did. And man, does this game really stick to the theme that you're playing a movie. When the game boots up, you're taken to a marquee outside of a movie theater where you would select your monster, the city, and the scenario you want to play. Then inside the theater, you'll see a crowd of people waiting as the lights dim low, the curtain rises, and the trailers and advertisements begin. I think it's a nice touch, but fortunately you can hit a button to bypass all that because if you've seen it once, you're not really going to want to see it again. Then the movie begins with the text on screen describing the monster, the place, and scenario before you actually start playing the game. And fortunately, you can also skip all of that by pushing a button if you're not too interested in the story. Once the entire scenario ends, you'll return back to the theater to see an epilogue in text based on what happened, and then see your score and then return back to the main menu to select another game if you'd like. Now, the best way to tackle the rest of this game is to run through all of the options it gives you to select. I'll just start with the 6 locations since it's the quickest to explain. The 6 selectable cities are Tokyo, New York, Paris, London, San Francisco, and Moscow, and there's no need to really go in depth on any of them since they all look the same, just with different topography and 4 to 6 landmarks that are distinct to each location. As for the monsters, I'll talk about each one separately, but they all mostly control the same. Up, down, left, and right to move around the map, walking into buildings will damage them, and the option to cycle through 3 actions with 1 button and perform that action with another. 2 of these actions are the same for every monster, a scream that could potentially paralyze vehicles and pedestrians on the ground, and Atomize, which has the potential to eliminate helicopters and airplanes flying overhead. The 3rd action is unique to each monster. The more you use each action, the more time it takes to recharge before you can use it again. First up is Godzilla, is what I'd be saying if he wasn't scrubbed out of this version of the game on the Evercade. Epix actually had the Godzilla license for this game originally, which I find kind of funny because in Crush, Crumble, and Chomp he was called Goshzilla. But here he was kind of the face of the game. But he's not licensed for this Evercade version, so the box art was modified as was the game's title screen. In the game he was changed from green to brown, and his name was changed to Lizardo, which I guess kind of works because all the other monsters are clearly based on real movie monsters, but have non-copywriting infringing names attached. Now, Lizardo moves really slow, but is incredibly strong and resilient. His special attack is Fire Breath, which can destroy objects directly in front of him. Next up is Spectra, which I'm guessing is filling in for Mothra. It's the weakest of all the monsters, but is the only one that can fly and moves really fast while in the air. Landing on buildings will destroy them instantly, however, don't land in water as that'll kill you. Aside from flight, Spectra has an extra action, which is a sonic weapon that will instantly eliminate all people and vehicles currently on screen, which comes in really handy at times. Next up is Mr. Meringue, who is filling in for the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He's pretty much exactly like Lizardo, except slightly faster and a little weaker. His special attack is the Spit Meringue, which lands directly in front of him, doing only some damage. Next is Mechatron, who kinda looks like a Transformer that can't transform. He's strong and resilient like Lizardo, except he can move quite a bit faster. The trade-off is that he can't recover like the other monsters can, and he'll also lose energy if he touches water. His special attack is a laser beam that behaves a lot like Lizardo's Fire Breath. Next is Tarantus, which is a giant spider, and I think there's a few movies out there that feature giant spiders, so I guess it could be like any one of them. He's pretty fast speed-wise, but average in all other stats, but I'm a little disappointed he can't climb up buildings. I mean, he just rams into them like every other monster. His special action is to shoot a web and then retract it along with anything it catches. Now I saved my favorite for last, and that's the Glog, obviously a stand-in for the Blob. He's got average speed and strength, but he's pretty tough and recovers quicker than any other monster. However, he's the only monster that doesn't have a special action. So what makes him my favorite? Well, he kinda does have a special ability, only it's a passive one that's always active, and that's his acid residue he leaves behind. Oh, you don't see it on screen, but it's there. With all the other monsters, they have to repeatedly ram into a building several times to destroy it. But with the Glog, he can simply touch it and walk away. The acid goes to work, and the building eventually collapses on its own. It's like the monster version of Kenshiro's You're Already Dead.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
So I've covered the monsters and locations, so the last thing to cover are the scenarios. All scenarios, except for one, will end in one of two ways. Your energy will run out and the monster will die in the city, or the monster simply leaves the city before dying, and you kind of want to do that because you'll get a ton of bonus points for escaping alive. The simplest scenario is called Berserk, and it's just causing as much damage to everything and everyone you can for points. Then there's Escape, which places you in the center of the city with an increased military presence, and you've got to get out of there before dying. And depending on the monster you pick, this can be very easy or incredibly difficult. Then there's Lunch, which will have you eating as much as you can to erase your hunger meter and then leave the city. The twist is, every monster has a different favorite food. So if you figure out what it is, you'll be able to leave sooner before losing all of your energy. Next is Destroy Landmark, and the premise for this one is that there's a radio frequency being emitted from one of the city's landmarks, and you've got to find and destroy it using the proximity meter before leaving the city. The last scenario is simply called Search, and I think it's the most interesting of all of them. This is the only scenario where you don't need to leave the city once you're successful. The premise is that your offspring has been captured and is being held in one of the buildings in the city. Like Destroy Landmark, you'll have a proximity meter, but here it'll only work at random times, presumably when the child is crying out for you, which you can sometimes provoke by screaming yourself. What I was not prepared for, though, is once you destroy the building the child is held in, you get to see what he looks like. And I thought it was worth playing the scenario as every monster just to see what their kids look like. I don't know why, I just got a kick out of it. I like the game, but it's definitely not Game of the Year material or anything like that. It does have a pretty slow pace, and it can take a while just to walk around the city, and the boundaries aren't marked at all. So sometimes you'll be walking only for the screen to just blank out and ask if you want to leave the city. It all happens pretty abruptly, and I kind of wish there were markings as to the boundaries of the city before you cross them. It's also the type of game where you need maps of all the cities if you want to know where you're going or what you should be looking for. I've also been a bit disappointed on how limited each of the monsters' actions are. A lot of them play exactly the same with slightly different stats. I like what the game is, but I think Crush, Crumble, and Chomp was much more interesting at the end of the day. Moving on into 1987, we have one of the first games in the epic Street Sports series, Street Sports Baseball. I hadn't played this one before, and I was kind of looking forward to it as I do like baseball games in general. The twist with this one, however, is that it's just a bunch of neighborhood kids playing in your choice of two improvised fields. One being a field littered with trash and the occasional odd object, and the other is a parking lot. Hey, I could totally relate to that as I remember playing ball in an intersection of a street when I was a kid. The corner of each block were the bases. You know, that probably wasn't a smart idea now that I think about it. Anyway, before the game starts, you'll get to pick who you want on your team. You'll pick a kid, then your opponent will pick, then you, and so on and so on. There are 16 kids total, and they each have different strengths and weaknesses, and it's really apparent in the game when you play. Some are fast runners, while some are extremely slow. Some can throw the ball fast, and others may be clumsy fielders. You'll get the details on each kid on the screen as they're highlighted, so there's really no guesswork. But part of the game is figuring out who you want to pick, what position they play, and what the batting order should be. Each kid is uniquely detailed, so they're easy to identify during the game. Now, you may have picked up that I said there were 16 kids total, which means there are 8 kids per team. And since a baseball team normally consists of 9 players, you may be thinking that each team is a player short. Well, the game does away with the catcher, and I suppose it works out somehow with the pitcher covering home base when the ball is in play. During the game itself, there are 2 views of the field. On the left is a big window showing the close-up action, starting with a view from behind the batter, and if the ball is hit, it'll switch to the location to where the ball will end up. The right window will display one of 2 overhead views, a far-away view of the entire field indicating where all the players are, and during a pitch, a closer-up view of just the pitcher and the batter. One thing that was very obvious as I was playing is that the game doesn't really follow all the standard baseball rules. Usually in baseball, if there's a pop fly that's caught by a fielder, any runners on base have to tag the base they were on before trying to advance to the next base if they think they can make it. However, in this game, all the runners will just start running to the next base as soon as the ball is hit. And at first I was like, hey, now wait a minute. You have to wait to see if the fielder catches the ball before running to the next base. But then I was surprised to see all the runners just teleport back to the base they were on if the ball was caught, and I thought that was kind of strange. Additionally, if a player can cross home base before the fielder can catch the ball, the run still counts, even if it's the third out. Now, I'm willing to overlook these issues because these are kids after all, and they can play by whatever rules they want to. However, I can't overlook how bad the view in the bigger window is. What I mean by that is that you'll naturally want to look at the big window for everything, because why wouldn't you? But I eventually learned that even though everything looks great in that window, nothing is actually in the position that it's portrayed as on the screen. When I first started playing, I was confused as to why I could not hit the ball at all while I was up at bat. Then I started looking at the smaller overhead view, and all of a sudden I could hit the ball. It took me a while to realize that when the ball is right over the home plate, on the bigger main screen, the ball looks like it's already flown past the base, and it's practically already off the screen. No wonder I couldn't hit it. The same view will screw you up while you're pitching as well. You can control the ball while in mid-flight, and I would occasionally attempt a curveball. The ball would appear to go right over the plate, but then I'd be shocked to see that the game claimed that the batter was hit by the pitch when it didn't appear to go anywhere near them. Looking at the captured footage, I saw the ball was in a completely different place on the main screen than it actually was as shown by the smaller overhead view. The confusion extends to the base runners as well, as sometimes players look like they've been clearly tagged out at the base, but wind up being safe because they've already cleared the base even though the screen doesn't represent that visually. The only thing you can really rely on the main screen for is catching fly balls or scooping up grounders. But I've got real issues with how that's handled as well. When the ball is hit, the screen jumps to where the ball is going and gives you an opportunity to get your fielder into position. The problem is that there's no indication whatsoever if the ball is in the air or on the ground. So you don't know if you need to back up to prepare to catch the ball or run forward to scoop up the ball off the ground. It's a complete mystery until the ball shows up on the screen. Even stranger is that when the ball appears on the screen, text also appears on the screen saying if it's a fly ball or a grounder. Well, gee, thanks a lot. That information would have actually been useful if it appeared before the ball did. But nope, it shows up when I already know. Also, I'm fairly certain it's impossible to hit a home run in this game. Even though both fields have a fence, I'm pretty sure the ball ain't going past the fielders. I thought maybe I just didn't witness one, but I tried looking online for any evidence of someone hitting a home run in the game, but I didn't come up with anything. Another strange thing is that when the game is over, you get asked if you want to play again. But there's no way to select no, meaning you'll have to reset the game to change anything. What really sucks about this is if you spend a whole bunch of time building your team, you're just forced to play the same game over and over and over again if you don't want to build it from scratch every time. Funnily enough though, you can save your team before starting your game, and I thought, oh, well I could just reset the game and load up the team I saved. Nope, the game crashes when you attempt to do that. Exiting the game back to the Evercade menu and loading the game up again doesn't remember your game save either. Technically though, you could build your team and then use a save state. The only problem is that the very first question the game asks you is what field do you want to play on. So you'd be stuck playing on the same field every time you loaded that save state. You know, I probably talked enough about this game, and I never even mentioned how I thought it was weird that you have to swing your bat to signal to the computer pitcher that you're ready before they actually throw the ball, but they'll throw a pitch without waiting for you if it's their first pitch of the inning. There's just very bizarre stuff going on with this game. I like how the characters are all unique, and there's a strategy putting your team together, but I don't like how you've got to rely on the smaller overhead view for nearly everything in the game. Given the choice of a Commodore 64 baseball game, I would have much rather preferred GameStar's Star League Baseball or Accolade's Hardball. Oh well, maybe next time. Battle Valley is a budget Usen title released under the Racket label in 1988. The premise is that terrorists have stolen 2 medium-range missiles and plan to use them on the Western world unless their demands are met. Well, we don't negotiate with terrorists, so the plan is to destroy the missiles while capturing the terrorist bases along the way. You'll start the game at your home base and push up to take the chopper, or push left or right to take the tank. You'll need to use both in order to make it to each terrace base, as there's always a bridge with a section missing that can only be rectified by using the helicopter's winch to pick up an object to fill the gap so the tank can cross, and only the tank can be used to claim a terrace base and to destroy the missiles. The tip the Evercade manual gives is to clear a path with the helicopter, then finish the job with the tank. Well, that wording is kind of vague, and I thought it meant to destroy all the enemy forces first with the chopper and then go back and grab the tank and drive it to the next base. But when I felt like it was easier to destroy the enemy forces with the tank, I would take the tank all the way to the gap, drive back, get the chopper, fill the hole, fly back, get the tank, and take it all the way to the next base. I eventually realized that if I kept doing that, I was going to run out of time, despite the fact that you get additional time for each base you capture. Then I realized the best way to handle it was to start out with the chopper, take it all the way to the hole in the bridge, eliminate anything that wasn't too difficult, fill the hole, go back, get the tank, and then take it all the way to the next base. Ah, so that's what that tip meant. There's a pretty good range of enemies to tackle along the way, and I found it interesting that certain missiles and fighter jets can be stopped by destroying certain warning systems found on the ground. Your chopper and tank can take a good number of hits before getting destroyed, and even if it does get destroyed, the game lets you have infinite lives. However, the catch is that if you are destroyed, you lose a good amount of time. So in reality, you can only be destroyed a certain amount of times anyway before civilization is destroyed. The nice thing though is that when you do capture a new base, your tank and chopper are fully repaired. You'll win the game when both missiles are destroyed. And does anybody else think it's strange that the only way to get rid of a missile is to shoot it with a tank? I mean, it doesn't really seem like a good idea to me. Anyway, the only real downside to this game is that the controls are difficult to get used to. The Evercade helps because a lot of the buttons have been remapped from the keyboard to the gamepad, but it still takes some getting used to. I mean, 4 buttons alone control your speed, with another for stopping and turning around. The thing that's most troublesome though is that you can't simply stop moving and shoot, as you always have to be moving to shoot because when you stop, both your chopper and the tank turn to face you. Because of this, some targets can be difficult to eliminate. Also, the chopper will always shoot forwards in a straight horizontal line, but you can move the tank's turret up and down. Eventually I got used to it. The thing that was really bothering me though is that I couldn't figure out why I would randomly turn around while firing, and it turns out that if you double tap the fire button, it's the same as stopping. And it kind of makes sense because on the Commodore 64 you would have had to press the spacebar for that. Also, I can't really get annoyed with it because there's the option to turn it off before starting the game. I just didn't understand what it meant since it said double fire mode on. Anyway, it turns out that I like this one. The music you get when booting the game up is pretty awesome as well. It's so awesome that the game lets you choose to play it during the game. The trade-off though is that you'll get no sound effects with the music playing. Also from Yusen in 1988 is Marauder, a game where you're in control of the Marauder battle car on a mission to retrieve the Jewels of Osmanias from the desolate planet Mergertron. Man, I probably butchered all those words. However, even though the civilization that inhabited the planet no longer exists, their auto defense system is still very much active. You'll travel vertically up through each level, eluding and destroying any of these defenses on your path to achieving your objective. This was another title I hadn't heard of before, and when I started playing it, it hit me that this played a lot like Granada from the Renovation Collection, but just a bit limited in what you can do. Here you can only drive around and shoot. No strafing or secondary cannon blast here. Also, one hit and you're dead. However, you do have a limited number of smart bombs that will destroy everything on the screen. On the original Commodore 64, this was activated by pressing the spacebar, but fortunately they mapped that function to one of the buttons on the Evercade, making this version perhaps a little bit more playable. Occasionally you'll run across a colored orb that you can destroy for power-ups such as an extra smart bomb, temporary invincibility, or an extra life. There is a catch though. The orbs will constantly be changing colors, and the power-ups you receive depends on the color of the orb when you destroy it. The thing is though, not all the colors will give you a power-up. Some of the colors will hinder your progress, such as disabling your turret, reversing your controls, or even taking away one of your lives. Even when you know what colors are good and bad, sometimes you want to hit an orb anyway, even if it's only flashing bad colors, because the orbs will also fire at you like just about everything else in the game. You also want to keep moving forward up the screen, because if you hang around an area too long, a drone will fly in and try to bomb you right where you are. Most of the time it's easily avoidable though. At the end of each level is a concentrated gauntlet of defenses to destroy, and once eliminated, your Marauder will automatically spin its way on to the next level, which I always found kind of funny.
Twirling, twirling, twirling towards freedom.
One of the game's downsides is that, just like Battle Valley, the game is not capable of playing music and sound effects at the same time, so you'll have to choose. The game defaults to music, which is probably the right choice, since you'll probably be holding the fire button down the whole game, and you'll primarily just be hearing the sound of your own gun firing, and while there are other sound effects, the gunfire will just dominate the whole soundscape, and there aren't really any other sound cues you can use to your advantage. But there was something about this game that really disappointed me. As I kept playing through the levels, I eventually experienced some deja vu as I started thinking, I felt as if I played this level already. I paused the game to do a little research and discovered that this game doesn't have an ending. The levels will just keep repeating. So this isn't a game you play to completion, but rather a game you play for a high score. Now there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But why make up a story that you're hunting down a jewel when there's no such thing in the game? I was expecting this game to have an ending with a story like that, so I was kind of confused when I realized I was playing a level I had already played. So in the end, I did like this game, but my expectations were a bit off based on the game's narrative, which is included in the manual for this Evercade cartridge. Also, from 1988, another racket budget title from Usen. This is Subterranea. And you can kind of tell this was a budget title because there really isn't much more to the game than what you're looking at now. It's a horizontally scrolling shoot-'em-up where the environment is more of a threat than the enemy objects are. I'd tell you what the game's story is, but as far as I can tell, there isn't one. Your ship has a single-fire weapon that you'll use for destroying enemies, as well as parts of the environment, but you'll also need to shoot control boxes labeled with a C in order to temporarily open gates, and there are also boxes labeled with an E that will activate temporary invincibility, which can come in real handy for flying through cavern walls. In fact, many of these E blocks are positioned as such, so if you decide to go and hit one, you'd better hit it because you'll need the invincibility to get out of the position you'll find yourself in. One weird quirk of this game I don't quite understand is if you shoot while flying up or down, the ship will tilt and you'll have double shots. I'm guessing that your ship has two guns, one mounted on the right side and one mounted on the left side, but since we're looking on it from the side, we can only see one bullet because the other bullet is directly behind the one we see. But when the ship tilts to fly up and down, then we can see both bullets. It kinda makes sense perspective-wise, but not if you really think about it too much. As a result of this quirk, you'll find yourself constantly moving up and down if you're able to in order to maximize your hit range, especially when you need to blow through part of the environment to allow your ship to pass through, and the bigger the opening, the better. Now, most of the time I played this game, I believed that the ship would only safely pass through gaps at least 2 blocks wide, since that's about the size of your ship. But that's not the case at all. You can safely pass through gaps only 1 block wide because your ship's hitbox is only the top half, not the bottom half. It's something I realized only after I accidentally moved the ship too much and found the bottom half was just going right through the scenery. Too bad the hitbox isn't the bottom half though, because that's where the bullets come from, and there will be times where you won't be able to hit certain targets because they're too close to the ceiling. The enemy objects that appear periodically only come in a few different shapes and only follow a few certain patterns that become very predictable the more you see them. They don't even fire back at you. The only real challenge they pose is the fact that the environment has absolutely no effect on them, so in some situations it may be difficult to shoot or evade them. You are given 5 lives to begin with, and colliding with anything will destroy your ship. However, you will be able to continue right where you left off. After each level, you're taken to a bonus round where you'll have the chance to earn an extra life. There, you'll have a limited amount of time to destroy a guardian by shooting its glowing spots, But the Guardian will constantly be building a shield, so you'll have to be quick to get them all before the time is up. If you destroy a Guardian, you'll get an extra life, and I believe that's the only way you can get an extra life in this game. If you fail, you still move on to the next level. You know, I really didn't think this game was all that bad. It can be quite a fun challenge to see if you can make it through each cave. The game does lack some polish though. I mean, the game's title screen has some pretty good music, but it's the only music there is, as there is none while you're playing the game. Not even the option to switch from sound effects to music like some of the other games in this collection. There's also no indication on how close you are to finishing a level. They'll just end without warning, and sometimes with bizarre timing, like new enemies appearing on the screen, but then a moment later, the level ends. The really weird thing, though, comes when you've finished the 16th and final cave. Afterwards, you'll still play the bonus game for an extra life, which doesn't make any sense because you actually can't score any additional points there. Then the game tells you it's entering the next level, then I'm thinking, oh, are there more than 16 levels? Then that very next screen says, mission complete, and then you're back to the title screen. I think a bit more tweaking and this game could have been much more than just a budget game. The last game in this collection is Stormlord, and it was released by Yusen in 1989. And this is a game I've known about, but only from the game magazines I read at the time. So I only really knew this as the game with the naked fairies. On top of that, I knew that this was a game that was on the Amiga and the Sega Genesis, but I had no idea this game was on the Commodore 64 until I saw it listed in this collection. So the story is something about an evil queen capturing fairies, and this is disrupting the peace and tranquility of the land or something like that. So then it's up to you as Stormlord to travel throughout each level, freeing all the captured fairies. As Stormlord, you'll have the ability to jump and fire a weapon. Tapping the fire button will lob some sort of object. I think it's supposed to be a fireball or something, but if you hold the button a bit longer, he'll throw a dagger. Both will kill monsters in one hit, but the difference is that the knife will go through some objects, the fireball won't. The nice thing about this Evercade version though is that the jump action has its own button. The Commodore 64 joystick only had one action button, and that was used for firing the weapon, so you needed to push up to jump. You can still push up to jump here as well, but now you've also got a dedicated button for it too. The game is obviously a platformer, however it's not as straightforward as simply getting to the end of each level. Rather, this is a puzzle platformer, as your goal is to free all the fairies in each level, and some of them are inaccessible without having a certain item in your possession. To make things more difficult, you can only carry one item at a time, and as soon as you collect another item, you'll drop the one you were holding in its place. Things like umbrellas will protect you from poisonous rain, while shoes will let you jump much higher than you normally can, and honey can be used to lure bees away from certain areas. And then there are keys which must be used for opening doors, and you've really got to be careful about which doors you open, as some levels won't have enough keys to open all the doors. This means that if you use a key on a door you didn't need to, you potentially won't be able to finish the level. Also scattered throughout each level are springboards that will transport you to other locations. So you'll need to keep track of where those go as well, because it's not immediately apparent, but each level needs to be completed in a certain amount of time as well. That's what the sun and the moon mean in the lower portion of the screen. It starts as the sun, and over time it will transition into the moon. When the moon fully takes over, your time is up. Once you free all the fairies in a level, before starting the next level, you'll be taken to a minigame of sorts, where you shoot hearts up at fairies flying all over the screen. If a fairy is hit, they will drop a tear, and if you manage to collect 10 tears before time expires, then you'll get an extra life. Now, once I understood the game, I thought it could be fun, but there are several things that ruin it, I feel. The first problem comes in how relentless some of the enemies feel. What I mean by this is that once you enter certain areas, monsters are just triggered to start appearing, and they're all much faster than you are. So you really need to be prepared, because you'll probably not be able to react in time to something unexpected. On the plus side though, if you die, you do get to continue right where you left off with some invincibility time to get clear of whatever killed you. However, this does not extend to if you run out of time. No matter how many lives you have, if you run out of time, it's game over. You can't even start the level over again. You have to start the whole game again from the beginning. The whole time limit thing really ruins the game the most, I feel. I mean, this is a game where you've got to figure out where items are and where you need to take them and how to navigate each level, and even when you do know exactly what you need to do, the time limit feels a lot tighter than it should be. This is on top of using keys on doors you shouldn't, so if you're in a position where it's impossible to finish a level, the time will run out, and then it's game over, and then you'll need to start the game all the way from the beginning again. I needed to look up a walkthrough for level 3 in particular, because I couldn't figure out how I never had enough keys to finish the level. And it turns out that there's one fairy that's trapped in an area where it looks like the only way to gain access is to use a key to open a door. But nope. If you do, you won't be able to finish the level because it turns out that if you simply stand on top of the ceiling where she's being held, the whole ceiling disappears and you don't need to unlock that door. Oh yeah, the game will pull that disappearing platform on you from time to time as well. But I mean, really, it's bad enough to pull something like that and have it cost you a life, but it's even worse that the game will trick you into doing something that'll completely lock you out of finishing the level and just ending the game completely. Also, this is another game that doesn't have an ending. There are only 4 levels, and when you complete them, you'll just start at level 1 again. The last thing I want to mention is that there's no sound effects in this game, as it's just music throughout the whole thing. But if the option was between either just sound effects or music, I think they actually made the right choice here because the music is pretty good. Alright, here we have our tier maker list with all our Commodore 64 games, and we will order these from my least favorite to my favorite. And as you can see, I've actually changed all the categories. I've heard the critiques about the old system going from like FD, CBA, S, double S, and triple S, and some people didn't like that. It was confusing for some people. I can understand that. So I've actually just went back and I've labeled these, more clearly what I feel. And they're actually added a couple more categories too. Now I've already gone back and I've redone all the previous games that I've done. So in the description, there's going to be a link to a web page. If you want to go to that page that I've created, it's just a Google page that I created really quick. It'll take you to links of how I ranked every game. And that was something else that was being asked for. So it's available if you go to that link. And this list will be too. But let's start with my least favorite game here, and that was Street Sports Baseball. And I'm going to put this on the not for me category. I think people actually do like this game. I don't really think it's bad. It's certainly playable. I'm just not a big fan of it. I kind of don't like it. So we're going to put that there. Next up, I think this is number 13 on the list, is going to be Stormlord. I'm going to put that here, just above Street Sports Baseball. Yeah, I mean, the whole time limit thing just kills the thing for me, and if it wasn't for that, I might actually have been either indifferent or okay with the game, but the time limit just kills it. And the fact when the time is up, you just have to start the whole game over no matter where you are in the game, that just kind of really sucks. So, next up, this is going to be number 12. We're going to put Lee, and I'm going to put this in indifferent. I didn't like the game. I did not like the game. Maybe if I grew up with this game, I'd like it. I don't know. There's just, it's just kind of bland, I guess. I mean, you have to, I don't know. There's only 2 guys. The final boss is a joke, and the fact that it just keeps repeating. A lot of these games just repeat, like Stormlord as well. So, if you're going to have a story where it's insinuated there's a goal, but you never can reach that goal, that's kind of, I don't know, I'd mark down for that, Next up, the Movie Monster game. And again, I put this on indifferent. Didn't like it, did not like it. It's just, once you play it for a while, you're like, what more is there to this? I mean, you could go for the high score, but it's not like you can score really high. It's not like you're scoring points nonstop during the game for every action. Not only that, but all the monsters are just way too the same. Like, they're just very similar, each and every one of them. Why can't the spider crawl up the building? Why can't the Mothra type character, I can't remember the name, I Spectra. Why can't Spectra, like, land on buildings? No, instead you crush them when you land on it. That makes no sense, but whatever. Next up, Subterranea, and I'm going to put this on okay. I thought this was okay for what it was. Certainly not the best game in the world. Definitely could use a lot of work. But at the end of the day, you're just trying to get as far as you can go. And I didn't think it was really that bad, just trying to navigate, the caverns. Next up, I'm going to put, where is it? Alleykat. Alleykat, right there on okay, right above Subterranea. Again, it's like a faster paced game, but again, it's very easy to get destroyed. But again, you can continue as long as you have money, but I think you can only really get destroyed once and then be able to continue on to the next race. And if it happens again, you're just definitely not going to have any money to continue. Not only that, but it is very hard to control the craft. And if it was a lot easier, if there was less to work, the controls weren't so complicated that you could do all this stuff with the vehicle, it might have been up higher on this list. Next up, also on the okay level, I'm going to put Iridis Alpha. Now again, this is one of those games that you really need to know how to play it before you can actually start to have a little bit of fun with it. But the reason why I can't put this up any higher is just because when you hit the third level, those cannonball guys with the tongues just come out and just rip you to shreds. It gets way too hard, way too quick. So I'm just going to say that's okay. Next up on the list, we've got Marauder. And I'm going to put this on a good level. I thought this was a good game. Kind of reminded me of Granada. I couldn't think of it. It reminds me of Granada, but just a really bare bones basic version of it. So yeah, I thought it was good. Next, I'm going to put Battle Valley. And this one took me by surprise because at first when I started playing it, I thought it was going to be some cheapo game. It wasn't going to be very good, but it actually is a very good game for a budget game. It's just that I kind of wish you could control the tank and the chopper just a little bit better. I don't know why you can't just stop and fire ahead or behind you. Instead, you have to constantly be moving in order to fire. And I just think that's kind of silly. So if it wasn't for that, it could possibly be higher. But yeah, I thought that was a good game. Next up, Gateway to Apshai. I'm going to say this was a great game. I liked it. I think I liked Tower of Doom better, but this was certainly a game you could come back to time and time again and have a different experience with every time. So I'm going to say that's a great game. Next up, Summer Games. Now I'm going to say this is a great game as well. Part of it may be nostalgia. There are certainly the events that are terrible, but the events that are there that I really do like, I think are great. It just, playing this game again, it just brought me back to the days where I played it originally. So maybe that's why I'm ranking it higher than some other people might. And it's the same thing with Winter Games, which is the next on my list. They're very similar. I'm also going to say that's great, but I do remember playing Winter Games a lot more when I was a kid. And I still do think that I enjoyed Winter Games more, as long as you ignore the figure skating completely. You're still left with a great game, I think. And then, number 2, I'm going to say is Impossible Mission. I'm going to say this is fantastic. The fact that it's randomized every time you play it, and you have an infinite number of lives, you're just up against the time limit. As soon as you realize what you need to do to put the puzzle pieces together in order to get the password to beat the game, you can have a good time with it. And even if you don't beat the game, it's still fun to run through and platform through all those rooms. The only thing you need to remember is when you boot the game up on the Evercade, you have to immediately reset to actually get a randomized map. And then finally, of course, the only game left, my number 1 is Jumpman, and I'm going to say this is fantastic as well. Now, I played this one early on because it was like the second oldest game in this list, and I played them in chronological order. And at first I was like, yeah, this is good. I am somehow strangely addicted to the game. And then as I played it more and more, I was going to put it on the great level. I'm going to say this is a great game. But here's the thing, is I was doing some testing with like the Evercade EXP and my capture and the timings of the audio and everything. And the game I went back to play, every time I went to test something, was Jumpman. I'm just completely addicted to this game. That's why I'm going to say it's fantastic. I know some people ranked it the lowest on their list, but the thing you got to remember is you have to change the speed. If you're playing the game at speed 4, which is the default, you're not even going to get past the vampire level because those vampire bats are going to move faster than you. And for some reason, when you up the speed, they still move at the same speed, but you're going to be much faster than them. And the game actually just moves at a way better pace, in my opinion, if you up the speed from its default F4. So if you didn't think Jumpman was a good game, but you didn't know you could change the speed, I recommend going back to it, changing the speed to 2. You have to basically pull up the virtual keyboard and push the number 2 before the level starts. It's an odd way to do it, I know. My number 1 game is just a lot higher than I initially thought it was going to be. Alright, so here we have the rankings of all my cartridges, and as you can see, I've completely redone this as well. Even from the video I recently put up saying this is how I'm going to rank things, I changed it as well. Because I went back to a scoring system because I wound up just basically ranking things based on how good I thought games were. So this is kind of scored based on that, and I just decided tier 1 through tier 5. If we get more collections, I could add tiers to it. But basically, I'm just trying to evenly distribute them between these tiers. And this is going to be available in the link below where you can pull up and see how I ranked everything. But yeah, the C64 Collection, when I put my secret formula in place, this is gonna rank right above Jalico Arcade 1 and Morphcat Games Collection 1. So basically right in the middle of what I consider the best Evercade cartridges and the, I don't want to say the worst, because a lot of these really aren't that bad. They're just, like Jalico Arcade 2 is certainly a good one, but since so many more of them I think are better, it winds up being lower on the list. But if I had to rank these collections, this is how I would rank them. And there you go. Those are my rankings for the C64 Collection 1. Up next, I'm going to be looking into the Alwa's Awakening and Cathedral Dual cartridge. I mean, there's only 2 games here, but these are more in-depth games, so who knows how long they're actually going to take me. But yeah, until next time, see you then. Bye.